Hey guys, it's Dani. Today it's time for another Q&A session. We skipped last week, but I just had so many topics I really wanted to address that I somehow skipped on the Q&A series, but it's okay. We're gonna try to make it up today. So in today's video, I'm going to answer the comments you guys left me in the comment section of my videos. Hopefully I'll get to as many as possible. Before we start anything, I want to go back a little bit to our issue with the small-leaved Phalaenopsis orchids. There have been some updates. Many of you told me your stories and your experiences, so I will address that really fast. First of all, the issue we have with the small-leaved Phalaenopsis is not setback. Let me show you setback. And here we have it. This is my Sideria. These are the older leaves. And then we have a small leaf and then a bigger leaf, and slowly but surely this orchid comes back to normal. Now this is setback. When an orchid suffers stress, and this particular orchid suffered root loss, if you can believe it. She didn't really adapt to semi-hydro right away. I repotted it and I found the roots dead, but now she has roots. So setback happens when a major stress factor occurs, such as loss of roots, loss of leaves, practically any of the vital structures of the orchid. In this case, the leaves are just tinier, but they look pretty normal. And I'll show you shape-wise what I consider abnormal. Do you see the leaf has this oval shape to it? It still maintains the normal shape, it's just tinier. And yes, it can be slightly deformed, but it's not very far from what a normal leaf should look like. And then the next leaves slowly but surely return to normal as the orchid bounces back. In our case, the new leaves do not look normal. So this orchid again has this oval shape to the leaves. It ends in a pointy kind of tip, rounded pointy tip. Well, the new leaves, the ones that look weird, are heart-shaped. Do you see the tip here? It makes this heart-shaped top, and all of them look like that. Also, they seem really distorted, and even though this orchid does have thick leaves, these leaves are just really hard, really tense. In this instance, the orchid doesn't really have a reason to produce these leaves. It has a good root system, has older leaves, did not go through this really stressful period other than adjusting to my environment. But this should not produce this dramatic difference. Do you see how tiny this leaf is in comparison to this one? It's not normal. So this is the difference between our issue and setback. All of the leaves produced will remain like this. They will not correct themselves with each new leaf produced, no matter how many roots we have, how much we feed the orchid, and so on. So I really wanted to address that just so you see the difference and what the problem is. I think setback is something we all experience. Many of us here on YouTube talked about it. I have a load of videos on it. So I can really see the difference between the two instances. Number two, somebody actually shared with me a link, which I will share with you down below. A study proposes that a zinc deficiency can cause this exact anomaly on Phalaenopsis. If you check the description down below, you'll see the article shows something that looks incredibly similar. I would call it identical. So what they propose is that using fertilizers with high phosphorus can lead to a zinc deficiency and can end up looking like this. And they also say that it is a common occurrence in nurseries because they pump phosphorus in the hopes of improving blooms, and the orchid goes into this deficiency. Now, this is something to research. I think the best thing to do is to test it out because I think we can actually test it. So some of you guys mentioned that you had Phalaenopsis doing this even though they were older, they were not necessarily new. So a zinc deficiency could explain this issue. However, though, if you have an orchid for a longer period of time and is growing normally with what you are using, what you're fertilizing with, and then all of a sudden starts to do this, it cannot really happen out of the blue while you're still using the same products, if you know what I'm saying. So I will address this question for those of you who have experienced this with older Phalaenopsis orchids. Did you change your fertilizer? Did you add something new to your routine? Additives, boosters, kelp, CalMag, whatever. Did you add anything new recently to your orchids? And also, please let me know down below what fertilizers are you using. Because the theory of the zinc deficiency, while it's something we absolutely need to investigate and it makes sense, there are some inconsistencies, such as if you have an orchid and you treat it for years with the same products and all of a sudden it starts to do this, then maybe it's not a zinc deficiency. I know orchids are slow, but not that slow. It depends how long you have the orchid for. I think one of my viewers said 10 years. In 10 years, a zinc deficiency would have already occurred. I'm still more inclined into the hormonal debalancing of the orchid, but I might be wrong. I'm willing to test it. I want to get some high phosphorus fertilizers, maybe something that does not contain trace elements. I think I can find something around here, and start to fertilize one of my Phalaenopsis orchids with that, pretty much try to induce a deficiency of the sorts. Also, my gibberellic acid arrived, so I will try to treat this one. Again, another thing, I have this orchid in my care for more than 6 months, time in which I fertilize it with MSU. Now, funny thing, MSU does have very low phosphorus amounts, and also it has trace elements, so I'm thinking whatever deficiency this orchid had, maybe it could have corrected itself by now. I don't know how fast it acts, but I just wanted to address that, let you guys know what other viewers are saying, and I'm really curious to read your comments down below regarding what fertilizers are you using, and if you introduced any additives with plant hormones, especially in your fertilizing regime lately. Kiran is saying that some of her Phalaenopsis orchid roots look a little brown, although they're still plump and apparently in good condition. And this is on a video in which I show something similar to what she has. I'll post a picture on the screen so you can see it. Well, the browning in my instance represents sunburning of the velamen. You can see it's actually patches of brown. It's not the entire velamen a consistent brown, like in the case of rotting. Now, these patches can be produced by a few things. The most common reason is salt buildup, which can happen through hard water. So if you're using tap water and it happens to be hard, it can leave those patches on the roots. It can also happen from the fertilizer if it builds up, or if you're over fertilizing. It's pretty much the same thing. Those salts can burn the velamen, but it can also happen if you have tannin leaching things in your medium, such as bark or coconut husk. They tend to stain the roots brown, and it's rather patchy. It's not a uniform staining. So think about these 3 possibilities and try to make sure that the water you're using is not hard water. Make sure you don't over fertilize. Flushing pots can absolutely help. I'll link you down below to my video on it. And I hope one of these 3 instances can apply to you, because now you would know how to solve it. Christine is saying she got a Phalaenopsis last September and is now in the process of putting out a second leaf, but no new roots. Should you repot it or leave it alone? Well, first of all, it doesn't necessarily mean the orchid is not producing roots. It can actually produce roots inside the pot. You might not see them. The orchid might not be putting out aerial roots or roots which you can see. She's in active growth, so it is actually a good time to repot, especially because you didn't repot it for a year now, and that medium might already start to break down and become too acidic. So I would say yes, it is safe to repot her now before she actually starts to put out flower spikes, and the fact that it is growing leaves is a very good sign. Maybe the roots, you just don't see them because they grow inside the pot. Ramya is asking if she can grow orchids outside even though the temperature is over 100 degrees Fahrenheit and above. Well, first of all, that's really hot, but it's very similar to my temperature. So if you know my channel, you know what orchids I keep inside in my growth space where I can control the temperature, and what orchids I keep outside. If you're not familiar with my channel, what I keep outside is Cattleyas, Vandas, Epidendrums, the reed stem ones, and Graycomes, and Dendrobium Phalaenopsis. These are all hot growers, and they did very well for me in my very hot climate. So the way to go about it is keep outside the orchids which are hot growers. I'll link you down below to my video about which orchids can withstand heat, and keep inside the orchids which are not really that happy in that temperature. But mind you, if you keep your orchids outside, even with the hot growers, you need to shelter them from the sun. Oh, I burned my orchids this year, so be very careful. Even orchids which love sun should be sheltered in those temperatures because they will burn. Mine get direct sunshine only in early morning and very late in the afternoon, and so far so good. They enjoy being outside, but yeah, you have to choose the orchids based on their temperature preferences. Francisco is saying that one of his Phalaenopsis orchids is starting to produce a leaf on one of the nodes on the flower spikes. Are they Keikis? Yes, if it looks like this, they're definitely Keikis. On each node, you can actually have flower spikes or Keikis. Sometimes though, you can actually have a leaf and then a flower spike starting from the leaf. It's a little anomaly, so you need to give it a little bit of time. I suspect it is a Keiki, but it can transform actually into a flower spike as well. Next up, a question from Chef Ramsey. Everybody calm down, it's not the real Gordon Ramsay, it's just funny, it's a joke, haha. Okay, so Gordon Ramsay, I like your shades, is asking if he should repot his orchid if mushrooms have started to grow in the medium. Absolutely. Now the mushrooms themselves might not be anything bad for the orchid, but they signify something. They signify that the medium is not properly sterilized and disinfected. The bark we use, coconut husk and all of that, it doesn't come from the natural habitat of orchids. So it's not like they have the microbial climate which they're adapted to. It comes from totally other places and it sits in deposits next to other products. So if spores come in contact with orchid medium, the medium is spoiled. As I was saying, mushrooms might not be a problem, but what if you have their fusarium spores or other pathogenic spores and bacteria which orchids might be sensitive to? At least that's my logic. Of course, I never tested it. It's what I suspect could be in that medium. And my opinion is that if you have mushrooms growing in your medium, you should definitely change the brand if it's a new medium, or if it's older medium, definitely go ahead and repot into fresh new bark or whatever medium you prefer. One of my viewers is asking a very good question. After I treated my orchid for spider mites, do I put it back in its location or do I have it quarantined or separate or for how many months and so on? Well, technically, to be safe, after you do any type of treatment, even if it's the oil treatment or another systemic insecticide, you should keep the orchid separated, quarantined if you have the possibilities. You should absolutely do that. And I do encourage you to do it. I, however, don't always do it. And this is something very personal. You cannot tell an experienced grower not to shower their orchids. Even though you know me, I always tell you don't put water in the ground. I always tell you that because there are many new orchid growers on my channel. I see my analytics, I see the questions that I get. There are more new orchid growers than more experienced growers. So obviously, I always issue these warnings. However, experienced growers do things their way because at some point you get some sort of confidence. And this doesn't mean that bad stuff doesn't happen to us. It just means that we know how to handle them. So instead of me taking the orchid, putting it in a place where it's not gonna get good light or it's not gonna get proper ventilation, I just prefer to put it back because I know how to handle the spider mites. However, though, it doesn't mean that I am 100% safe. Absolutely not. It just means that I'm confident enough to know that I can spot the infestation in time and I can treat it in time. And I'm not gonna freak out if I see more spider mites. But you know, for a beginner, it can get very overwhelming. And I know from my own experience how overwhelming it can be. I had such a bad time 2 years ago when I moved here with the whole pesticide. I'm not gonna go into the story now. It's gonna be for the failure compilation. But yeah, it's hard to deal with a pest infestation. One of my goals was to find ways to treat it fast. And the oil solution is a fast and pretty straight-on treatment. You spray it once and poof, it's done, pretty much. So yeah, that's the only difference. You should actually keep the orchid at least separate for a while, but of course, not all of us do it. Brandy has a question related to a Phalaenopsis. It appears that it has stalled its new growth. And what would I recommend to do for the orchid? Nothing. Phalaenopsis orchids do that, and it's a little frustrating and infuriating sometimes. My Phalaenopsis orchids were not properly seasoned, let's put it like that. I live in a climate with a very extended summer, and they put out their 2 leaves for the season, and then in September or October, they were like, oh, it's still warm, let's try to produce another leaf. And of course, until the end of October, when lower temperatures arrived and flower spikes needed to be initiated, they decided, oh, hold on, we need to pause the leaf, concentrate on the flower spike. So what they did was pause the leaf and concentrated on the flower spike. They can do that. Yes, they can pause the leaves if they feel that they need to produce flower spikes, if the temperature gets cold. They can also pause it if they feel like they don't have enough energy, but if your orchid has enough roots and is in good condition, maybe the reason is the production of a flower spike. But really it depends on your climate and your temperature here. So in my experience, yes, they can absolutely pause leaves, and I don't like it when they do that because the leaf, when it starts to regrow, has a little bit of a kink right in the middle. It will start to regrow in the next growing season. But in the future, you could theoretically extend the growing season if you provide more warm temperatures and no temperature drop, in the nighttime especially. But that's all theoretical, and I'm not sure what the case is with your orchid. Hopefully, it is the flower spike case. Arman is saying their Miltonia sunset has a mealybug infestation, but they're afraid to treat it because of rotting. What they should do, and also should they repot their orchid in bark or LECA? Well, first of all, whatever treatment you do with any type of pesticide, which is liquid, which has water, can lead to rotting. There's nothing 100% safe. If you go and buy toxic pesticides from the store, you'll still expose the orchids to rotting because you're diluting it in water. Whatever has pooling water has the chance to accumulate bacteria and fungi and pathogens and create rotting. So there is no guarantee that your orchid will be fine after treatment with anything you treat. However, there are ways to improve your chances of success. You can leave the orchid outside if it's warm and breezy, at least for 6 hours or an entire day in a shady location. You can also put it in front of a running fan, which will increase water evaporation. You can also put a little bit of dish detergent in no matter what solution you have, because it is a surfactant. It makes sure there is no surface tension, and I made a test actually, check it down below if you're interested. Water with soap evaporates much faster than water without soap. So you can increase your chances to avoid rot, but you don't have an 100% rate of success and avoiding rot. So at this point you need to choose. What do you want more? Risk rotting but take precautions and minimize your risk, or not treat the mealybugs and maybe go about it manually and maybe quarantine the orchid, and I don't know. What is worse to you, the mealybugs or the rotting? Keeping in mind you can actually minimize the chances of rotting. And about the LECA versus bark question, I cannot tell you that. Whatever you like best, whatever you have more available, whatever is cheaper for you, whatever you want, really, whatever you feel more comfortable with. Resident Kitten is asking, why do all orchid growers recommend having the dosage of fertilizer rather than just following the label for the correct dosage? It's again what I told you about experienced growers. You cannot go to a very experienced grower, hybridizer, whatever, and say, hey, you need to follow the instructions, because they know what they're doing and they've observed stuff. Also, orchids are all different between them. Some orchids require less fertilizer than others, but have you seen fertilizers especially made for Miltonias on the market? You didn't. That's because we can use the very same fertilizers but in lower quantities. Also, all of us live in very different climates and environments, and our growing spaces are different, therefore the metabolism and the speed of our orchids will differ even season to season. So we always customize a little bit the fertilizer dosage situation to what we think works best. And this will come with experience. It's not like this elite club that does it. It comes with experience. And everybody will eventually start to customize their fertilizer regime preferences, because inevitably you will get to know your orchids, what species need more fertilizers or less, in what season they consume more, and pretty much how fast they grow. So in time you will actually get to customize your fertilizer regime as well. In the beginning though, until you get adjusted to everything, until you understand and you have a grasp of how everything goes and gain more experience, it's a good idea to follow the instructions as much as possible. Even more, play it safe, use half the dosage recommended by the instructions just to play it safe. And yeah, that's why everyone has their own preferences, because everyone grows different orchids in different environments, in different media, and we try to explain why we do what we do. Alrighty, so this has been it for today. I have a feeling it's a pretty long video, but I really wanted to address the small leaf of Phalaenopsis situation because I think it's really important. Maybe it is indeed very easy to fix, and in the end all I want is to find a solution and yeah, have a fix for the issue. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you've enjoyed it, and you know the drill, like or dislike this video below. Subscribe to my channel for more Q&A videos, tutorials and other orchid related topics. Turn on notifications if you'd like YouTube to notify you whenever I upload a new video. And if you're curious to know what products and things I use with my orchids on a regular basis, expand the description at the bottom. You will see a list with everything I use. And with that said, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye!